Today is April 22nd, 2025. 3 days after Easter, 2 days after Easter. A lot going on this week. We've got things such as our Pope actually passed away on Easter Sunday after having a meeting with our Vice President J.D. Vance, which was unfortunate. And the world is uh, is mourning right now over Pope Francis's death. And then there's just so much going on in the world. But the question that we are asking today and our conversation today is about the impact of uh, Black culture, cultural capital, and how Black America shapes American culture and commerce. And this is the Cut Podcast. I am Jay Jones, your host, and thank you for joining us today. I would like to start out by just acknowledging the fact again that as of next week, I will be shifting my focus from more of a historical perspective on my podcast to one um, of current events, discussions, and also I will be highlighting some conversations around diversity, equity, and inclusion. We will ask the question, what now? Now that our federal government is removing a lot of funding from DEI activity at large corporations, schools, etc., and trying to influence the teachings of Black history um, as we know it, and basically trying to erase our Black culture and erase Black history as we know it. So we asked the question, what from where do we go from here? So what will we, how will we refocus our DEI efforts, our diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts to not lose all the money spent by corporations on diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives and continue learning about each other and um, moving forward. Excuse me. It is definitely allergy season. So I beg your forgiveness up front because I'm sure that I will perhaps be a little bit impacted by allergy season. Um, so today we are exploring the enormous cultural and economic influence of Black America on the broader American society and global culture, from music to language, fashion to food, sports to social media. Black cultural production has profoundly shaped American identity and commerce. Yet a persistent paradox remains. Incredible cultural influence hasn't translated into proportional economic benefit for Black communities. Today, we'll analyze the economic impact of Black cultural production, examine the disconnect between cultural influence and economic benefit, and explore strategies for ensuring that Black communities receive fair value for their cultural contributions. This conversation isn't just about acknowledging influence, it's about recognizing value and ensuring that the communities that create culture share in the wealth that it generates. And we've seen this over and over again, whether it's on social media, videos on social media, where you see um, dance that was influenced by African roots or Black American roots, um, emulated in videos from folks in other countries, people who don't look like us, and others of other cultures who tend to appreciate our culture but not our kind. So the first thing I want to discuss is the Black cultural influence and economic impact. So this is one where we can think about Target, for instance, and what they're going through right now. And yes, of course, that effort, that boycott effort, is a combination of Black Americans and allies from all different backgrounds, and those allies who recognize the need for change and who are in this fight with Black Americans to ensure that fairness and equality uh, roots from equity, and that equity is something that generational um, challenges over generations we've had, whether it's racism or other economic practices that may benefit one group while denying the same um, outcomes for others. So we have a long way to go, but we're still here. We're still here and we're still going. So as long as we move together and move forward, move smartly, we will persevere and we will overcome. So Black cultural influence and economic impact. The influence of Black cultural production on American society and global culture is so pervasive that it's often taken for granted. Let's examine the scope and economic significance of this influence. Music offers perhaps the clearest example. um, I mean, yeah, I'll give you some examples after this. After we go through this little bit of information. So, virtually every popular American musical form, jazz, blues, rock and roll, R&B, hip hop, has roots in Black cultural expression. These art forms have generated billions in economic value through recordings, performances, licensing, and adjacent industries. And again, that's billions with a B. Hip hop alone has grown from a grassroots cultural movement in the South Bronx to a global industry worth over $15 billion annually. Its influence extends far beyond music into fashion, language, advertising, and broader cultural sensibilities. Um, so, and when we talk about hip hop, we can also talk about some of the ways that hip hop has been kind of overtaken by other cultures, or not even that, how it got so popular and it was making so much money, and then all of a sudden um, your award shows started to kind of blend all the other genres into the hip hop genre. And you know in doing so, it keeps a lot of Black artists from achieving the level of success that they deserve in those award shows. For instance, the Grammys used to have rap artists, categories, and they used to have hip hop and R&B categories, and now they kind of blended all those into one genre, into one classification, and that takes away, just from doing that, takes away at least six awards and makes it two, for instance. So and then too, you also see the inclusion of others into the hip hop genre, and because it is it is uncommon to see, for instance, someone who is white rapping, and if there is someone who happens to be white who's really good, then because there are seven times more whites than there are blacks in the U.S., or six times more white than there are black in the U.S., then let's say, for instance, on American Idol, if all white people voted for a white uh, person who's running or who's competing, and all black people voted for a black person who's competing, the black person still has no chance of winning because there are five, six times more white voters than there are black voters. So it's things like that we have to look at anytime we are looking at data and fairness and equity and equality. So uh, let's move on to language. So language provides another example. Terms and expressions originating in Black communities regularly enter mainstream American vernacular, often through music and social media. This linguistic innovation shapes communication styles in everything from casual conversation to corporate marketing. In fashion, for instance, Black style innovations regularly move from street to runway, setting trends that drive retail sales and shape global fashion. Brands from luxury houses to fast fashion retailers derive enormous value from aesthetics pioneered in Black communities. I mean, let's talk about it. Look at Pharrell Williams' uh, his collaboration with Louis Vuitton and how well Louis Vuitton did with that. And let's talk about this year's Met Gala, which this year's Met Gala will be focused on fashions for from Black history and Black culture. So again, we talk about how much money will the Met Gala make because of that, and how much money those those designers make from designing fashions that emulate Black culture. Sports and entertainment represent additional areas of profound influence. Black athletes and entertainers are among America's most recognized cultural ambassadors globally, driving viewership, endorsements, and merchandise sales worth billions. Okay, this gives me a headache talking about athletics. Gives me a headache. Some of the most influential um, folks in the world happen to be athletes, professional athletes, whether that be basketball players, NBA players, NFL players, and the influence they could have if they just said no to playing one game. You know, of course, they are in contracts that are um, really complicated, and there's a lot for them to lose in doing so. However, they do influence a lot, especially the youth, especially people who like sports. And you ask yourself, where would professional athletics be without Black players? That the answer to that question alone should uh, be something where you see the power of Black economics. Social media presents a more recent example, with Black users often leading platform innovation from Twitter, which is now X, to TikTok. Content formats and trends originating in Black digital communities frequently define user experience across these platforms. And we see it now. We see dancers from everywhere creating dance videos, whether they are meant to get a laugh or not. These are often influenced by Black culture. Um, I was looking at one of the comments, and yes, the Met Gala is about to really, really just blow the fashion industry apart with some of the fashions that we're going to see on display, and I personally can't wait for it to see it. Um, a Nielsen report estimated the buying power of Black Americans at $1.5 trillion annually, comparable to the entire gross domestic product of Australia. This economic force, combined with cultural influence that transcends demographic proportion, represents enormous value creation within the American and global economy. So, what is the problem? Why is it that Black people always seem to end up on the short end of the stick in terms of wealth and growth? And let's talk about the paradox of influence without proportional benefit. So that this will hopefully help answer our question. So, despite this enormous cultural influence and value creation, Black Americans and communities haven't received proportional economic benefits. This paradox appears across multiple domains. In music, studies show persistent disparities in compensation, even as Black musical forms dominate popular culture. A recent analysis of the recording industry found that Black artists typically receive less favorable contract terms and lower advances than their white counterparts, creating similar music. Um, so when we talk about For instance, we can look at the whole Beyonce and Taylor Swift saga. And I call it saga, even though they have said, a few times that they are um, not necessarily competitors. They both enjoy what they do. They love what they do. They're both wonderful artists, and they are the best at what they do individually. And I know, for instance, you know, I was just talking about with some friends how Taylor Swift sued or was in argument with uh, Ticketmaster because people were complaining they couldn't afford her tickets, and her audience is a majority white female audience, whereas Beyonce's audience is majority black male, and or black male and black female. And it is interesting that the ticket costs can be the same in certain areas, but when you get further out in the stadium, the tickets for Beyonce's concerts tend to be a little bit less than the tickets for Taylor Swift's concerts. Um, but when you talk about contracts and you know um, how Beyonce has been able to do so much with an independent label, and um, it's just it- there. The comparison is not really a comparison if you look at how she's able to accomplish what she's able to accomplish on her own versus the help that Taylor Swift gets. So the fashion industry regularly appropriates styles developed in Black communities without acknowledgement or compensation. When these styles appear on runways or in retail collections, the economic benefits flow primarily to companies with limited Black ownership or leadership. In other words, they come in, they buy out these companies, they buy out these fashion deals so easily because they have just this tremendous amount of money. And then even though the money that the person who did own the label or the brand made was significant and great for them, the amount that the industry itself will make as a result of the the cultural blow up of these fashions is enormous and well outweighs the benefit of the person who initially owned the sold it. In digital media, Black content creators often see their innovations copied without attribution or compensation. A recent study of creator compensation on major platforms found that Black creators earn significantly less than white creators with comparable followings and engagement metrics. And I know some really wonderful creators, and in the future, I'm sure I'll have them on with me for discussions, especially the diversity, equity, and inclusion discussions that I'll be having, as many of them are or have been collaborators with me in my professional arena as a diversity, equity, and inclusion executive. So even when individual Black creators achieve success, the broader economic benefits often don't reach the communities where the cultural innovations originated. The South Bronx, which is the birthplace of hip hop, remains one of the poorest congressional districts in America, despite the global industry that emerged from its cultural creativity. Several structural factors contribute to this disconnection between cultural influence and economic benefit. Ownership and control of distribution channels and platforms remain concentrated among companies with limited Black representation in leadership and equity ownership. So, to say that bluntly, the ownership and control of distribution for these uh, cultural for these South Bronx cultural items um, sit in the hands of companies that are run by mostly white people with very few Black people, and the equity and ownership is very low for Black people. Intellectual property systems often fail to protect cultural innovations and that don't fit established categories of copyright, trademark, or patent. And you see this a lot. You see where you can have something, and the best example I can give you is on the movie, for instance, Dreamgirls. When and if you don't know who Effie White uh, and and if you haven't watched the movie Dreamgirls, then maybe this is something that influenced you to go watch it. But it's where the music mogul took a song that was created by someone who used to be in the group and just reproduced it, and didn't, initially did not face any backlash over it, but in the end he did, because the patents and copyrights and trademarks um, had not been deemed exclusively to the person who did the song first. The individualistic orientation of creative industries focuses on individual creators rather than the communities that nurture and develop cultural forms. Um, that's pretty self-explanatory. Then, of course, historical patterns of economic exclusion limited Black access to capital needed to build and scale enterprises that could capture more value from cultural production. And we see this in other industries as well, such as commercial real estate, where in order for someone to contract with the large scale business, the larger construction companies, they have to be bonded by insurance up to so many millions of dollars that they don't have access to. So it kind of leaves them out unless the larger company is willing to allow them onto their insurance policy for the purposes of doing business with them. Um, this paradox represents not just an injustice to creators, but a broader economic inefficiency, which is what I was just mentioning. When the communities that generate cultural value cannot participate proportionally in the wealth it creates, their capacity for continued innovation and participation in the economy is constrained. All right, so that was a little bit about the influence without proportional benefit. So now, what I'll do is I'll talk about models for capturing fair value. And across various cultural and creative sectors, innovators are developing models to ensure that Black communities capture more of the value generated by their cultural production. Ownership and control of distribution. When we talk about ownership and control of distribution, we have to look at and recognize that a new generation of Black owned media platforms and production companies is working to ensure greater control over how Black cultural content is distributed and monetized. Companies like Macro, which is founded by Charles D. King, focus specifically on producing content for multicultural audiences while ensuring that creators maintain greater ownership and control. In music, for instance, artists like Chance the Rapper has demonstrated the viability of independent distribution models that allow creators to maintain ownership of their work while reaching global audiences. These approaches challenge traditional models that often separated creators from the long-term economic value of their work. And I've already mentioned Beyonce on that front. And there are many others. When you look at Prince, when you think about Prince, how he, well, actually, the artist formerly known as Prince, how he literally gave up after he did multiple albums to get out of his contract. And once his contract was done, of course, the name Prince belonged to the entity that he worked for. So he gave up the name and everything. And he was just as great after that as he was in the beginning. So you have to look at it that you have to look at the outcomes, and people can do it if they do it. They just have to take the chance of doing it. Sometimes the confidence or the they feel that umbrella, that safety net by staying in those contracts. The community benefit agreements in physical development projects that leverage Black cultural capital, like entertainment districts themed around Black musical heritage. Some communities have secured community benefit agreements that ensure local residents and businesses share in the economic value generated. We see this in like the Bronzeville Cooking Initiative here in Chicago, which includes specific provisions to ensure that a development celebrating Black culinary traditions includes Black owned businesses and benefits existing community members. So then you have cooperative ownership models, which cooperative ownership models structures offer Another approach to ensuring broader community benefits from cultural production. Platforms like Resonate, a streaming music cooperative, explore models where both creators and users share ownership and governance of the platform. So the governance of the platform is a real big deal. Um, then you look at blockchain and smart contracts. You have emerging technologies like blockchain and smart contracts offer potential tools for ensuring that value flows more directly to creators and communities. These technologies can automate revenue sharing. They provide transparent tracking of usage and potentially protect forms of cultural production not well served by traditional intellectual property systems. So, in other words, they protect people from those patent challenges that I mentioned earlier. Cultural heritage preservation and licensing. Some communities are how to document, preserve, and license elements of cultural heritage to ensure both proper attribution and economic benefit. These approaches draw on indigenous cultural intellectual property models while adapting them to specific context of Black cultural production in America. These innovations share a common principle, recognizing that cultural production emerges from communities, not just individuals, and developing mechanisms to ensure that economic value flows back to these communities rather than being extracted and concentrated elsewhere. So then we talk about the last thing I'm going to talk about is the policy approaches and broader implications. So beyond individual and community initiatives, policy approaches can help address the disconnect between cultural influence and economic benefit. Intellectual property reform. So current intellectual property law provides limited protection for cultural innovations that don't fit established categories. Reforms could create new protections for cultural expression that emerges from communities rather than identifiable individual creators. Antitrust and platform regulation. So I got a couple more, three more to go. Antitrust and platform regulations. Then we're going to talk about investment and capital access, and then community cultural districts. So for the antitrust and platform regulations, addressing the concentrated power of platforms and distributions that profit from Black cultural production could create more equitable market conditions. This includes both traditional media companies and digital platforms that monetize user-generated content. So we're seeing that more often now. I believe it's because the people are losing trust in general media or traditional media. Investment in capital access. The targeted investment in cultural enterprises rooted in communities that generate cultural innovation could help capture more economic value locally. Community development financial institutions, such as some of the newer banks, and impact investors are exploring models specifically focused on creative industries in underserved communities. So, in other words, you have so many people who are so talented in different things, and now we're trying to create industries in those areas of talent. Community cultural districts, formal designation and support for cultural districts that could help the communities leverage their cultural assets for economic development while preventing displacement of the residents who created those assets. And that's a big one. The issues we've discussed beyond Black communities to broader questions about who benefits from cultural and creative production in our economy. Similar disconnections between cultural contribution and economic benefit affect many communities, particularly those marginalized within existing economic structures. Addressing these disconnections represent not just a matter of fairness to creators, but an opportunity to develop more equitable models for the growing creative and cultural sectors of our economy. So as I conclude, today we've explored Black cultural production, has profoundly shaped American identity and commerce, generating enormous economic value. Yet a persistent paradox remains. The cultural influence has not translated into proportional economic benefit for Black communities. Innovative approaches across various sectors are working to address this disconnect, from new ownership models to community benefit agreements to technological solutions. These innovations offer potential pathways, not just for more equitable participation in cultural economies, but for rethinking how we value and compensate creative work more broadly. The challenge of ensuring that communities benefit from the cultural value they create connects to broader questions of economic justice. When we recognize cultural production as a form of labor and wealth creation, we can develop systems that distribute its benefits more equitably. Throughout our season, we'll continue exploring how economic justice connects to various aspects of American life, from constitutional rights to corporate power, from political systems to alternative economic models. Thank you for joining me tonight. And I know that we've talked about a lot of things, but these are very important things. And I hope that you're able to, if you didn't catch them all, you go back and you'll watch this again and you look at this, because we really, really need to figure out how we can make the benefits of our culture resonate within our communities and help build wealth in our communities. Um, so thank you for joining this episode of the Cut Podcast. Subscribe at Cut Podcast on YouTube for new episodes every week. As I mentioned, I will start to provide resources and organizations working to ensure more equitable participation in cultural economies, but also more on diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. And until next time, remember this: culture isn't just entertainment or expression. It's a form of wealth creation that deserves fair recognition and compensation. Show us the money. All right. Thank you so much for your listening tonight, and we will talk soon. Stay tuned.